loves! Welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new. If you've never seen one of my videos before, I have a weird, crazy life and a lot of strange things happen to me, and I like to tell stories from those times. And one of those things that wound up being like really popular on my channel were babysitting stories. My parents didn't let me have a job growing up, so I have a lot of babysitting experience because it was pretty much the only work I was allowed to have. And then on top of that, I wound up working at a church for a couple of years in the nursery, and I had babysitting jobs from that. And of course, working in the nursery was basically like babysitting multiple kids at one time when I worked in the church. And so today I thought I would tell a couple of stories from when I actually worked in that church. And I've said before that the church was most definitely haunted, so it kind of like doubles as like a paranormal story as well. So it's sort of like a 2-for-1, and I know I haven't done my own story times in a while. I really like reading stories that I find on the internet. I think they can be so cool and creepy and interesting, but also I like telling my own because it's more personal and I get to share things that I find interesting or creepy or weird with you guys. Before we get into it, I'm going to be talking a lot about where I have been for the last month coming up in another video. I was in 6 hospitals in 1 week. I have been out of commission for the last like 2.5 weeks, so yeah, I will be chatting about that really soon with you guys. I am feeling a lot better though, so thank you guys all so much who wished me well on Instagram and stuff like that. I'm feeling so much better finally, and I'll explain what happened in a different video. But anyways, today I'm going to be talking about some of my like nursery babysitting experiences from an extremely haunted church. The cool thing about my church was that there were 2 different campuses. There was North Campus and there was South Campus, and as you can imagine, this was at the north end of the town that we lived in and the south end of the town that we lived in. The difference was that North Campus was extremely old, historical, had been there for hundreds and hundreds of years, and then when the church kind of started to like outgrow itself, they built the South Campus, and that one wound up drawing a newer crowd, a younger crowd, even a larger crowd. But I always had like a fondness for North Campus because it's kind of like where I grew up, you know what I mean? So yeah, that was how my church worked, and nothing weird ever really seemed to happen at South Campus because it was new, you know, like I feel like it wasn't haunted, like nothing had happened there. Like I had a couple of weird experiences when I was like teaching there properly, but I feel like that doesn't fit into today's theme of like babysitting. So all of these are going to be from the really, really old church that I worked at. I knew things were off with this church from the minute that I went there when I was like 8 years old, but I was pretty much there my whole life, whether it was working there, existing there, whatever. When I started working in the nursery, of course, I was spending a lot more time at the church, and I was alone a lot of those times. And again, these are just experiences from when I was babysitting, like working in the nursery. Like there are so many more, it's insane. What I think was even stranger was this was not the actual church that I would work in. Sometimes I would watch the kids over there, but it was very, very, very insanely rare. Most of the time we went over to the life center, like the family life center. So it was basically a completely different building, and over there was like the nursery, and there were like Sunday school rooms, and there was like a big place where everyone would go and have coffee and stuff like that after the service. So I was over in that building completely alone most of the time. If I worked with someone else on a Sunday, it was usually at the other campus because it just was so much larger. So I was always alone in this big building, and I guess the first like strange thing would be, so there was a woman that worked there. I was hired because someone did pass away. There was an opening. When I was like, I think 17, I went on to work at the church, like officially. I had always worked with the church for the church because my parents were the ministers of music. They basically directed music and stuff like that. So I always like worked under them, and I got paid through them for doing work, but now I was officially hired by the church to work in the nursery. And this was because one of the elderly nursery workers did pass away. And I don't know if it was just habit, and it always seemed to be the younger kids, and this is why I do think it was somewhat paranormal, because the kids that would never have known her would still do this thing. Kids would always act like there was someone else in the room, especially the young babies would always like coo and giggle at nothing. And I know that's like what babies do, obviously, but they would always look at the chair that she used to sit in. And I never really sat in that chair. It was like an old, like rickety rocking chair. And she would always sit there. This woman was so sweet. I loved her to pieces. Honestly, she watched me when I was like way younger. She taught Sunday school for a while. And she was just such a sweethearted woman that I used to think like the kids were looking at it and remembering her, but it was always babies that would do it. It was always the really, really, really young ones. and they would like look at her chair and always talk like someone else was in the room, like babble at a specific area in the room. Their eyes would follow something, like someone else was obviously in the room, but no one ever was, because again, I always worked alone. And so I thought it was kind of interesting, and I'm not saying that the two things are correlated and that, you know, her ghost was like at the church or whatever. It was just strange. It was always that chair that she would sit in, and the kids would just stare at it for no reason, and they would talk and act like someone else was in the room with us. You get what I mean? One time, actually, one of my younger ones, I wrote this down specifically because I wanted to remember it, actually crawled towards that chair and acted like she wanted to be picked up. And again, it could just be a thing where like, maybe that's what she did when she wanted to be picked up by the other nursery workers, but she had never done that to me. And she wasn't even like a clingy kid. She just crawled over to the rocking chair and reached her arms up like she wanted someone to pick her up, but no one was there. One of the scarier things, there was a conjoining classroom to the nursery. Sometimes I would use them interchangeably depending on the age group that I had, because sometimes I would have a lot of babies and toddlers, sometimes I would have older kids. Honestly, the ages went everywhere from like 0 months to like 10 years, depending on the day. It really was not a nursery as much as it was just glorified babysitting for a ton of kids. So if there were a lot of older kids, I would take them over to this conjoining classroom because there were bigger, better toys. There were a lot of like activities and things to do and things to draw on and stuff like that. But in this particular situation, I had not gone into that room. I had not unlocked it, whatever it might be. I never went over to it that day because I had all babies. And I was doing my job, watching the kids, playing with them, whatever, and I heard someone call my name from the classroom right next door. I had the only keys that day. Of course, like the other workers had their keys and whatnot to get into those rooms. We didn't actually have like church keys, like we couldn't unlock the actual church building. We could just unlock like rooms inside of the Family Life Center. But neither one of them were there. I was the only one with keys that day to those rooms. And I heard someone call my name from the next room over. I assumed it was one of them, whatever. I didn't think anything of it. I just assumed someone was by and needed me. Looking back in hindsight, it made 0 sense for someone to be calling me from that room because I can hear the doors open from like, you can always hear every door in that building open. No matter where you are, it's just really, really, really loud. And most of the time the building is completely and totally silent and it's huge. I heard someone call my name from the next door over, but it didn't like occur to me that that was strange in the moment. I grabbed my keys, I unlocked the conjoining door, and I went into the classroom and no one was there. I was like, hello? And I walked around, no one was in the room. No one was anywhere to be found. And I went to the actual door of the classroom and it was still locked from the outside. Like I opened up the door and then checked it and it was still locked. There was no one in the building. I yelled hello like 4 or 5 more times. No one was there. The conjoining door to the nursery was not only closed, but locked. And luckily I still had my keys on me, but I had left it open. I had not closed it and I had not locked it. And it's not one of those where like they had a knob or whatever that you could lock it with. You had to lock it and unlock it with a key. So none of the kids could have done it. And I had like all babies that particular day, all really young kids. And so like, it just creeps me out to look back and think like what could have happened to the kids. Like if I hadn't had my keys and I had to, I don't know, go grab somebody and leave them totally unattended for a minute. But it was really strange because I heard someone call me, went like unlocked the door, did everything. The door closed itself, locked itself, and no one was there. That particular day, I heard nothing else, but like I was saying, you could hear every door in this building open and close. You could hear the front door open and close. You could hear the door halfway across the building open and close. It was just big and it was mostly empty and you could hear every noise in that building. And I know because I'd scared myself completely ishless before thinking I was alone and I wasn't. And usually people will call out to you, you know, let you know that they're there or that they're locking up or that they're turning off the lights now or whatever it might be. And so I have 2 different experiences with weird, I can't quite explain these. The first one is, I think I may have already said this, but from where maybe I didn't, where the nursery is, I can see everything. I can see anyone that comes into the building. I can see anyone that walks into the church. From where we were, you could see absolutely everything. You could not enter the building in a way that I could not see. There was another door, but that door was usually kept locked just to prevent people like coming in and out. And so the only door into the church I could easily see. So the door opens, the front door opens, and I check outside and I don't actually see anyone going inside. I think I probably just missed them, but I hear the front door open. So when I peeked out into the hallway, the front door closes and no one ever comes around the corner. So there's like an entryway, but there's no doors from that entryway, if that makes any sense. And no one ever came around the corner. I was too scared to go and see, because like after a few minutes, and I yelled like hello, like, you know, expecting someone would come, and no one ever did. These are really heavy doors as well. It's not like wind could open them or anything like that. The door opened and no one ever came into the building. And before anyone's like, oh, well, someone left, no one was in the building with me. Like I said, I worked there completely alone. So no one ever came around the corner, and I never heard the door open again. So like no one went back out. It was really creepy. And then there was another time that I was locking up the building during an evening service of church. It was at like 7 p.m. or something like that. So it was totally dark, and I was turning out all of the lights, and I was locking up the building. Usually in situations where you have to turn all the lights out and you're locking up and stuff like that, you usually yell something out. And so I yelled out, I'm locking up, so that if anyone was still there, they would know that I was locking up and they could call back to me like, wait, or, you know, okay, I'm coming, or whatever it might be. So I turn out all of the lights in the building, the nursery, like the back rooms, the kitchen, whatever. And I just get everything completely and totally shut off. Every door is locked back up. And by the way, if you feel like this might be a lot in terms of security and whatnot for a church, we had a situation with someone stealing from our church. I guess a few years before that. I told that story actually. I will link it down below. It's called I Caught an Intruder, or We Caught an Intruder, or something like that. So yeah, we kept everything like really tight ship, just everything nicely locked up, of course. So I lock everything up, I yell out, I'm closing up. And as I have turned off every light in this building, I am completely 100% alone. My parents, after they would finish up their church service, would wait outside next to the car for me. So I am alone in this building, cannot stress that enough. And I turn out every single light, and as I'm about to leave, one of the lights in the very back of the building switches back on. It's in a room that is like across from the nursery. I really don't know what it was used for. I'm assuming like Sunday school or something. We never used it personally for what I did. So the light comes back on and I yell hello, and no one answers me. And so I'm a little bit like weirded out, but I turn on the lights again and I walk back to the room to go and shut it back off. No one's there, no motion sensors or anything like that, by the way. Nothing's like on a timer in this church, and I definitely switched it off. Like switched the light switch off, and when I came back it was switched to on. And I kind of just assumed maybe, I was really trying to explain it away because I really didn't want to think too much about it, and no one was answering me, so I was just trying to get done what I needed to get done and get out to my parents' car. So I switched it off, I literally ran to the front door and I locked up the building and I went outside. Literally as I was walking out to my parents' car, I looked back into the building, and the same room, the light had come back on. And I just looked in there and there were no shadows, there was no nothing. And I just like went home and I was totally 100% freaked out. But that was one of like the creepiest things, because I had to go back and turn it off. And then I saw it on the second time and I was like, nope, someone else can deal with this. Like, not my problem today. I think the last like reoccurring thing that I can say is I would always hear what sounded like footsteps, what would sound like someone like running down the hallway. On top of the doors opening, I would just hear footsteps a lot and no one would ever show up. And like I said, it was, you know, me working alone, so people would usually announce themselves, whatever. And so I would hear people like running down the hallway and like brace myself for like the door to open or something like that, and the door would never open. No one would ever say anything. So that was creepy. But then the last thing that I have that I can currently think of, and I'm sure that I'll remember more things as this comes up. Usually when I tell a story about something, I'll remember more and more details as time goes on. And this was something where I worked there for so long, you know what I mean? I had so many weird things happen. But this story in particular is really weird. I had this little girl who I absolutely adored, like just the sweetest thing on planet Earth, and we're gonna call her Grace. One day she was really distraught and just like walked in, and she just didn't seem happy. I hadn't been there the previous Sunday, at least I don't think so. It was something where I had missed a Sunday with her involved, whatever it was. And so she walked in and she was really distraught, and you know, I said, hello Grace, like how was your week? You know, how's school, this and that? And she was like, oh, it was good, blah, blah, blah. And she just seemed a little bit quiet. She just seemed a little bit off. And I was like, is everything okay? Do you want to talk to me about something? And she was like, I just really would like it if you could work always at this campus. I want you to always work at this church and never go work at the other church because I don't like the mean lady. And I'm like completely taken aback because the other two women that I worked with were so insanely nice. And I was like, so are you talking about Miss like blank or Miss blank, you know, their names? And she was like, no, the other lady. And we had not had a sub. There was nothing like that. We signed a log when we came in and when we left because we were paid hourly for the nursery. It was not a very like streamlined method of checking in and out, but that was what we did. And there was nothing on the log that said someone else had subbed. No one else had been there. And so I was like, what mean lady? Like, I'm so sorry, sweetie, I'll always work here, you know what I mean? And she told me that there was a lady that had worked there and that she hadn't seemed happy and that she just stood in the corner and watched everyone and she wasn't smiling. And I thought this was so bizarre. She didn't give me any detail about the way she looked or anything like that. She just said that it was a mean lady. Like it was a lady that wasn't very nice. She just stared at everyone and wasn't friendly. And then she told me that this mean lady, this whatever, that had been standing in the corner and watching them play, had taken one of the other nursery workers' keys. And I wound up asking that person because she was actually working at the other campus that day. And like I said, I would usually work with someone at that campus just because it was so much bigger. And I asked her, hey, did someone take your keys like last week or whatever week that I had missed? And this girl was like, yeah, it was the weirdest thing. The keys were in a cupboard and none of the kids could reach said cupboard. On top of that, we had child-proof locks on every single cupboard. Basically, her keys had gone missing. They had looked everywhere for them and they turned up in this cupboard where none of the kids could have gotten to. No one else had been working that day. She'd been completely alone in the room the whole time and her keys just went missing and turned up in a cupboard and she had no clue how they got there. And I mean, that's pretty much all that I can think of right now, and I'm sure that I will probably remember more stories from this situation, but I know you guys love babysitting stories and I know you love paranormal, so I hope this satisfied your needs for both. I love you guys so much. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I love you guys and I will catch you next time. Bye!